that was in there, that would make me be supportive. Next, from Matt L., 920. When do you think we'll see either federal legislation allowing medical marijuana or widespread adoption of it on the state level? Which is more likely to happen first? Well, we're already seeing adoption of it on the state level. That's because you can have referenda on the state level. Given our Constitution, you can't have national referenda. On the whole, I think that's a good thing, but it does impede marijuana. The reason I say that is that this is one instance, I don't think this is universally true, this is one instance where the public's ahead of the politicians. The politicians are still frozen in fear that they're going to be considered soft on drugs, whereas the average citizen thinks that people who want to lock you up for smoking marijuana are soft in the head. In virtually every state where it's come up, a more sensible approach to marijuana has won. I'm a co-sponsor, again with Ron Paul, by the way, because we have a lot of libertarian commonalities with regard to personal conduct. We differ on economics. Ron thinks minimum wage is a terrible thing, and I think it's a good thing. But in the personal conduct area, we're very close and work together. We have legislation to allow medical marijuana to go forward, but also to allow the personal use of marijuana. I think what you're going to see, and here I will give the Obama administration credit, the Bush, well, you go back to the Clinton administration when these referenda on medical marijuana began. Janet Reno, a great attorney general, ordered that there be no enforcement of the federal law against marijuana in those states where it happened. John Ashcroft came in, a very right-wing guy, and reversed that, and disgracefully was prosecuting sick people for using marijuana, which was allowed under state law, but federal law trumped it. The Obama administration has moved back towards the Clinton position, not quite fast enough, but they moved back. I just saw an instance in Massachusetts, in Provincetown, because Massachusetts, and I supported it publicly, over the objection of a lot of the law enforcement people, who I think were wrong, Massachusetts now took away criminal penalties for the personal use of marijuana. And so 4 men in Provincetown were smoking marijuana. They had not realized that they were on the national park part, and because they were in the national park part, the state law didn't govern. So they were arrested, which was ridiculous. The notion that we're paying federal employees to arrest people for smoking marijuana in a state in which it's legal, because they happen to walk a couple of feet over a park line, is very dumb. Then what happened was one of them, Andrew Sullivan, who's very prominent, is not an American citizen. Andrew is a legal permanent resident. He's decided not to be a citizen, his choice. And because of that, because of dumb laws that we have that say you are automatically deportable for the smallest offense, we're talking about legal permanent residence now, he would have been deported for smoking marijuana on a national park in a state where it's legal. So the prosecutor brought all those cases. The judge said, well, I'm not going to prosecute this man. I'm not going to find him guilty. He would have been convicted. So people said, well, that's unfair because the other 3 got convicted and he got let off. And some people said it was unfair to let him off. My answer is the reverse. It was not unfair to let him off. It was unfair to arrest the other people and prosecute them. So the Obama administration has gotten better, but not better enough. The answer is I think you'll see more states do it. And I do believe within a few years we'll get some federal legislation, at least on medical marijuana, because here, as I said, the public is right and they're wrong. Next, from J.S. Cuppy. I never realized this, but pronouncing these names is actually difficult. People understand, when you're making up your name, think that somebody might want to say it and try and be pronounceable. J.S. Cuppy, or J. Scope. No, because of 2 P's. J.S. Cuppy. Mr. Frank, back in September 2003, you declared that Fannie and Freddie were not facing any kind of financial crisis. The more people exaggerate these problems, the more pressure there is on these companies, the less we will see in terms of affordable housing. Have you publicly admitted, or do you now publicly admit, that encouraging banks to extend credit in what we call the housing bubble was a mistake? That the special privileges granted to Fannie and Freddie distorted the housing market by aligning them with capital that would not attract under pure market conditions? Would you agree that easing credit requirements to expand mortgage loans against low and moderate income families place the GSEs in harm's way? At what point do we sacrifice good lending standards, risking such danger to provide affordable housing? Fair question. There's a question. I wasn't specific enough. Those of us in the area of housing, as in any line of work, sometimes use what we call terms of art, words that have a particular meaning. Affordable housing to people who work in the housing area does not mean home ownership for low-income people. Affordable housing generally refers to rental housing. And that was the distinction that I had in my mind, but I admit I didn't articulate. But I think people listening to me knew. What I was trying to get Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to do was more financing for rental housing. I do believe that for many low-income people, home ownership is a mistake. They are pushed when they can't afford it. Home ownership is not an easy thing. There are people who may have their own social pressures and other pressures who probably shouldn't get into home ownership. The fact is, it's a mistake to say, okay, I'm going to buy this house because if everything goes right, if I don't lose any income and there are no major problems, I can pay the mortgage. Because you may lose income, particularly people in the lower echelon who are vulnerable to economic pressures. The roof may literally fall in. There may be some other kind of problem. So I was talking here about rental housing. Secondly, it says, do I admit that encouraging banks to extend credit was a mistake? I was opposed to banks lending money for home ownership for low-income people. In fact, this has been a party issue. It's ironic. The Wall Street Journal, which has an editorial about with a very bizarre way of thinking, in 2007, so let's put it this way, the Democrats were not in power from 1995 to 2006. In 2004 and 2005, some of us on the Democratic side tried to get legislation adopted to restrict subprime lending to low-income people. The Republicans rejected it. They said that's an interference with the free market. In 2007, when the Democrats took the majority and I became chairman, we did pass a bill in the House to restrict bad loans on subprime. The Wall Street Journal editorial attacked me and said I was restricting credit. So this is exactly the opposite of the case. Now, as to 2003, here's the deal. I do not think that Fannie and Freddie were facing a crisis in 2003. Neither was AIG. Neither was Lehman Brothers or Merrill Lynch. What happened was, and the Bush administration took the lead here, pressure then came to lend money to people who shouldn't have afforded it. If you look at the numbers, subprime loans are spiking just as I'm talking. So maybe I should have seen this a little earlier. In 2004, and this is critical, the question quotes a statement I made in 2003. A year later, the next year, the Bush administration ordered Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac substantially to increase the number of loans they bought for people who were below the median income. The Bush administration in 2004 got Fannie and Freddie more deeply into the subprime market. I went back to check. I have the quote from Bloomberg News in 2004 in which I say, this is a mistake. It's bad for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and it's bad for the people. So after Bush did this, at that point, yes, I did admit that it was that there were problems. It wasn't that I didn't see the problem in 2003. It is that the actions the Bush administration took at that time and subsequent pushed us into a problem. And by the way, with regard to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, legislation to regulate it never passed Congress during the 12 years the Republicans were in control because they had to fight among themselves. The Republican House passed a bill in 2005. The Republican Senate didn't like that bill. The Republican chairman of the committee, Mike Oxley, said he could have gotten it through except George Bush gave him the one-finger salute, and that caused the problem. In 2007 again, when the Democrats became the majority and I became chairman, we passed the bill that the Bush administration asked us to pass. The Senate, unfortunately, waited a year, and by the time they did it, it was too late.